Okay, so what this problem does is it takes a variance, which is just the difference in what we thought we were going to get in our actual, and then it's going to break it down into two parts. That is the quantity difference, how much of the difference was because of a different quantity or different hours than what we expected, and the second part is how much of it was difference from price or rate. Okay, and when we break this down between quantity and price, we're going to be looking at it in terms of direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. So all the quantity variances for these have a name. So direct materials, we call it materials quantity variance. Notice we're just talking about direct materials and we're under quantity. For labor, it's how efficiently do we use our labor, so it's called a labor efficiency variance, and again, that's still just direct labor, the quantity variance. And then for overhead, we're going to call it overhead efficiency variance, and again, this is your overhead quantity variance. Okay, this is just the specific names that we call those quantity variances. All right, then for the price variances, we're going to have names for these also. Direct materials will be called the materials price variance. Direct labor will be called the labor rate variance, and overhead will be overhead rate variance. Notice that all the prices either have the word price or rate. Both of those mean dollar amount changes. Okay, there are a couple of different ways to do this. One is to memorize the formulas. The other is to remember this one layout, and then you can derive the formulas each time you need them. So that's the way that I'm going to do it here. So this is what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at standard quantity. Beneath that, I'm going to put standard price. Beside that, I'm going to put actual quantity. Underneath that, I'm going to put standard price, and then I'm going to do two actuals. I'm going to do actual quantity and actual price. All right, so if you just remember that the first two that we're going to compare are standard to standard, and then actual to standard, and then actual to actual. And then if you also remember that your top ones are always going to be your quantity, and your bottom ones will always be your price. All right, and then the other thing that you can remember is that quantity can also be the same thing as hours, and price can also be the same thing as rate, depending on if you're looking at direct materials, direct labor, or manufacturing overhead. All right, so now that we have these set up, okay, what we're going to do with these is that when we look at the first two, we're going to be looking at the first four, we're going to be looking at, when we look at these together, we're looking at quantity variances. When we look at the next four, so the middle ones are used in both, then we're looking at the price or the rate variances. So here's how we're going to do it. If we need a quantity variance, and it doesn't matter if it's direct materials, direct labor, or overhead, it's going to be used the exact same way, we're going to be looking at these four items, okay? And the ones that are the same are SP. So I'm going to pull SP out. Now I'm deriving my formula. I'm going to pull it out. And I am left with SQ minus AQ, although I'm going to always say the AQ first because that's how they do it in the formula. AQ minus SQ. All right, and that is going to give me my quantity variance for whatever I need it. It could be a materials quantity, it can be a labor efficiency, or it could be an overhead efficiency. The only thing that would change is whether or not I use the word price or rate or the word quantity or hours, but they're both the same. It's the dollar and then it's the quantity. All right, that's my quantity variance. When I'm coming over here and I'm ready to do my price variance or my rate variance, I'm going to be looking at this. I'm going to be looking at these four. Okay, so AQ is the one that's the same, so I'm going to pull that out as I derive my formula. I'm going to say AQ, and then I'm going to say AP, or rate, minus SP. And that will give me my price variance, or my labor rate variance, or my overhead rate variance, but it's going to be under this column right here. I'll put an underline here so that we know what we're talking about. Okay. All right, so now I'm ready to work the problem. So it's going to ask me to do the letter A says to compute the direct materials price and quantity variances for the month. So we're looking for the direct materials price, that's this one, and quantity variance for the month. I'm going to start with quantity variance. All right, so I'm looking for SP, so that means my standard price. So I come up here and I look for my standard price for direct materials. So standard price is going to be 2.5 per ounce. So I'm going to say 2.5 per ounce times, I need my actual quantity, So my actual quantity is going to be given down here where they say during the most recent month the following activity was recorded. That means that it's my actual. So I'm looking for the actual amount of direct materials. 20,000 ounces of materials were purchased. All the materials were used. 900 hours of direct labor time were recorded. All right, therefore 20,000 ounces of material was my actual quantity. So I'm going to say 20,000 ounces. And I'm going to subtract my standard quantity. Okay, so that was the amount that I had expected, and that was going to be, standard quantity was 7.2 ounces per bottle. So I need to say 7.2 times 2,500. Okay, so that equals 7.2 times 2,500. All right, so that means that 18,000 is going to be my standard. So I can now say 2.5 times 2,000, and that means that my quantity variance is 5,000. All right, so next I'm going to be looking at my price variance for direct materials, and it's going to be the AQ times AP minus SP. And so when I look for my actual quantity of direct materials, I'm going to be looking through this actual information. So my actual quantity is going to be the 20,000 ounces of materials that were purchased and used. So it's going to be 20,000. And then when I look for my actual price, I'm going to see that, let's see, my actual price is going to be $2.40 per ounce. So that's going to be my $2.40, and then my standard price is going to be given up here at $2.50. So when I subtract those two and then times it by 20,000, I'm going to get 10,000. It's favorable because my actual was $2.40 and my standard that I was expecting was $2.50, so this is a favorable variance. All right, part B says, okay, so this is part A, asking me for direct materials. Part B asks for the price and the quantity variance for my labor. So let's look at it. Let's do quantity first. SP times AQ minus SQ is going to become S, and instead of price it'll be rate, times actual. Instead of quantity it'll be hours, just because now we're talking about labor. And so when we look for our standard rate, it's going to be 10. So if we look up here for standard rate for direct labor, it's $10 per hour. And then we're going to be looking for our actual hours, and our actual hours are going to be 900, given right here. 900 hours of direct labor time are recorded. And then minus 1,000 is going to be our standard quantity. Okay, and we're going to get that because we're going to say 0.4, that's our standard quantity, times the actual bottles of the material that was produced. So 0.4 times 2,500 is going to be 1,000. So 900 minus 1,000 gives you 100. 100 times 10 gives you 1,000. It's favorable because our actual was 900, our standard was 1,000, so we actually used less direct labor hours than what we anticipated, so therefore it's favorable. Alright, so the last part of part B is going to be the price variance, and that is going to use the AQ times AP minus SP. So we're going to have 900 as our actual hours, and then AP minus SP will be 12 minus 10, and all that's given right here. $12 is going to be, because we say 10,800 divided by 900 hours, that gives you the actual rate per hour. And then the $10 is given up here per hour. So 12 minus 10 is 2. So $2 times 900 is 1,800. This is unfavorable because our actual was more than our standard. It was more than what we anticipated.